So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. So first off, welcome. Thank you all for joining us for a brief webinar on data warehousing and automation and robots. So I'm Chris Lundberg, and let's go to the slide. There you go. Yeah. So I'm the CEO and founder of Frakture. I think there's a slide.
You've got one over there.
Okay. Prior to this, I founded an organization called Democracy in Action. That was way back in the early 2000s during a couple presidents ago. And I also founded a group called Thoughtful Labs to help groups with CRM work, again, about 5 or 6 years ago at that point. So we started to realize, both at Salsa and even afterwards, that there was a number of new challenges that groups are starting to run into. So it used to be that you could get by with just a handful of technologies. But at Frakture, we started to realize that we needed a new way of thinking about technology. And so Frakture is really at its core a modern, new way to think about how you interact with technology, how you organize, how you do marketing communications. And that way is organized around robots, automation, and what we call data warehousing. We got to this only after a few trials about it, and we recognized that we used to be able to have a nonprofit CRM, a digital marketing platform like an eCRM for email, donations, et cetera, and maybe 1 or 2 point solutions, and those used to be your technology environment. So come around 2006, 2007, this is a very common setup for groups, maybe 1, maybe 2 databases, and a couple point solutions at most. In the last 5 or 6 years, though, particularly in the last 2 or 3, we've seen an absolute explosion in the number of technologies that groups have to use. So what started off as kind of eCRM, the things you had to have, started to explode into a lot of online fundraising solutions. It started to explode into a huge number of online actions, organizing technologies, digital advocacy technologies, et cetera. In the meantime, we started to commoditize on things like emailers, on things like public-facing forms, et cetera. And we started to see that to be a functional organization these days, you need to be using a dozen or more different technologies for reporting, for your user-facing front end, for your back-end infrastructure, for basically everything you need to do as a nonprofit organization, you need to use dozens of technologies. This has now caused a huge amount of challenge in any organization about how they deal with those technologies, how they work with those, all those systems. And it's complicated as hell. There is so much going on at a given organization right now that trying to keep track of it all and trying to know what the best systems to use are is almost impossible. The amount of staff you need becomes huge. So the present reality looks at that there's all these advanced new approaches that you need to use to be competitive, but you are limited by the number of people you have on staff, and you're limited by how good you are managing your data inside of that. And this leads to huge amounts of lost opportunities for organizations because you're unable to reach out to all the different areas you need. This is the problem that we face, and the problem we were looking at Frakture, and we realized we needed more people, we needed more resources, we needed more things that we could do. So we decided to use bots. Okay, well, not really these bots. These are kind of like, evil bots. And you guys have heard a lot of evil bots, everything from T1000 all the way through botnets and, the bots that are used in attacks on websites, et cetera. That's not the bots we're talking about. We're talking about here good bots. So bots can be used for good or bad. We choose to use them for good. So good bots are bots that are well-trained and able to accomplish repetitive rule-based jobs that sucks up a huge amount of time and energy from your particular team. In our case, a Frakture bot is a programmer script that is trained and is built to understand a variety of different systems. So we have about 130 different bots now that are all designed to work with CRM technologies, fundraising technologies, backend database technologies, warehousing work, data 10, you name it, and we've probably got a bot in the sector that will work with the So, that's kind of a brief overview of bots. I'm going to cover a brief overview of bots, a brief overview of a data warehouse. We're going to get into about 5 or 6 examples of how this is applied in organizations right now and some of the major benefits of it. So these are bots. The other word that we're going to be using a lot of is this word warehouse, and kind of what the core of this presentation is about. When you're dealing with bots, they typically need a place to work, a place to operate. This is kind of basically what we call a warehouse. So in Frakture terms, the word warehouse to me is all over the place. In this context, though, when we think of a warehouse, we think of an independent, very large, and accessible database. By that, I mean independent of your CRM, independent of your eCRM, independent of kind of your web technologies, your fundraising system, your, it's often called a database of record. So a warehouse is independent of all of these, and is critical to how you think about where a warehouse fits in your organization. It's large. Data warehouses typically work with millions or billions of records. We're talking about the full history of individuals. We're talking about all transactions, all actions, all emails sent, etc. So they're typically in the millions and billions of records. And what we mean by accessible is that different technologies can easily get in and access that information and pull the information out or get their information pushed to them at volume. So this is beyond APIs, right? So APIs are fantastic. They have defined a whole decade of online existence, but they are typically limited in terms of scale and volume, particularly at the millions or billions of transactions records. So that's what we talk about when we talk about a data warehouse. We've all had questions about what is not a data warehouse. So some of the things that, for example, are not data warehouses, Salesforce is not a data warehouse. There's been a lot of time and effort, and a lot of people have spent millions of dollars jamming data into Salesforce and treating it as the place where all their data needs to live. It doesn't work. We've tried it. We've worked with a lot of organizations who have tried it, but because of some of the scale, some of the accessibility components of it, and because of some of the interface challenges with Salesforce, Salesforce is not what we qualify as a data warehouse. Your CRM is not a data warehouse, right? So where you store your customer records or your donor records, not a data warehouse, right? So also your fundraising database is not what we're talking about here on the data warehouse. Basically anything that you might upgrade for the interface in the next 20 years, you can think of as not necessarily a data warehouse, right? What we're doing is we're saying that your data needs an infrastructure that is independent of the technologies you're using. The reason for that is some of the biggest pain points people are going through right now is trying to upgrade to new systems or migrate or integrate to the new technologies that they're using. And it's very hard to move because all their data is wrapped in with all their business logic on their front end. So for example, if you have eCRM where you have lots of logic baked in about how you're doing your targeting, et cetera, trying to move to another eCRM with maintaining that same targeting becomes extremely hard because not only do you have to move the data, you also have to figure out the business rules, you have to carry over the business logic, you got to think about source coding, and all of this stuff that we spend a lot of our time doing. And these are the types of things that by thinking of data independently, we can make a lot of those challenges easier. So we're going to go through 6 different things that illustrates what's possible once you build an independent data warehouse and connect it with your systems, and what you can allow for this. So we mentioned a little bit about this at the get-go, was bringing data together. So the bringing data together is a huge part of a data warehouse. As you know, most of your systems have different sets of data. Your fundraising database has your donations, your donors, etc. Your email system has email addresses, contact history for email. Facebook has data. Twitter has data. All this data lives in independent spaces. With the warehouse, it provides you an avenue and a location to bring that data together and start working with it, to analyze it, create targeting segments, to report on it that doesn't exist before. At Frakture, we tried for a while to just jam information into the other databases out there. And it took us a while, it took about a year or two to realize how hard it was to try and jam data, basically square pegs into the round holes of existing CRM. So when we launched our warehousing, it was a recognition that oftentimes data does not fit into existing systems, existing native systems, as opposed to an independent data warehouse. That's kind of some of the main themes about bringing the data together through that warehouse. It allows you to do a whole bunch of amazing things. So one of the amazing things that data warehousing allows you to do is start to reach new markets, right? So one of the biggest challenges of getting into new spaces, whether it be, I'm hoping all you guys are doing, Google Ads at least, but if you go out to some of the targeting, highly hyper-targeting areas like Facebook or Twitter or online ad services, you quickly run into limitations on knowledge of how to get into those markets, how to target in them, how to freaking use the interfaces, right? How to even find the right button to use. So with bots and warehousing, a lot of what we do is automate and standardize how those interfaces work, so that you can pull down Facebook statistics from Facebook ad statistics, stack them right next to your email statistics, combine the results, move sets of people where they need to go. So if you want to start targeting your results based on fundraising performance in your email system, moving segments into there, refreshing the data, basically getting this cycling of data in and out of new systems such as Facebook and newer systems than that, as well as combining that data with information from your legacy systems. It becomes a huge opportunity. So good example, we work with a couple of groups right now with creating custom audiences inside Facebook and Google, so that you can actually do custom targeting based on information that lives in your CRM or information that lives in your donor database. So this is useful for Facebook ads, as well as remarketing sites for your mobile point roll seismic. These are all things that we've worked with in the past to help people with targeting information based on different data sets in different siloed bits of information in their organization. So reaching new markets is a very powerful thing you can do when you have bots, because you no longer need the expertise to get into these spaces. Previously, you would have had to hire expertise in those areas, but that's something which bots in particular help you get around. So one of our clients is Amnesty International. One of the challenges Amnesty was facing with the number of tools that they're using was, how do you integrate systems that may not have existing APIs or APIs that are changing, and leverage new features such as email drip marketing based on data in your fundraising database. So they elected to use Tableau. They were doing a number of different things. So we'll cover a couple of things that they're doing. One of the things that we're doing with them is we're pulling in all their data from their direct mail, from their database of record, from Roy Solutions. We are grabbing that data every single morning, so our bots are pulling it into the Amnesty data warehouse. And we have constructed in that warehouse views of that data that includes attrition views, attrition based on source, attrition based on whether they were offline or online acquisitions, basically a number of different reports. They were looking to try and reduce to increase their retention, to reduce some of how people ended up leaving the list. They were struggling with this because they had to not only grab the data, but they also had to figure out how to massage that data in SQL, because some of the solutions they were using didn't have those reports out of the box. So in this case, by pulling all the data into one spot and creating what we call views on that data, they have a daily refreshed bit of information on retention across all of their channels that's independent of their technology. So we can merge in data from their direct mail vendor as well as their digital, their ECRM vendor, and construct groups and segments from those people as well as reports. We'll go ahead and push sets of those people into a MailChimp drip marketing campaign, leveraging some of the very advanced drip marketing components that MailChimp has, so that they can actually send out emails also to subsets of the list that exist beyond what their existing CRM vendor does. So the result of some of this work that we've done means that they have dramatically improved new monthly donor retention because they now know when and how people are falling off. They do a much better report on reporting for their canvassing organization, and they can give reports back to those canvassers to see who's doing well, who's doing poorly, in ways that their canvassing tool was unable to do. And in their case, it was done easily, right? So they didn't have to have SQL knowledge to do it. They didn't have to have any information about how to integrate with these systems. We deployed a data warehouse, we plugged in the bots for them, and they had that up and running within weeks. So it's a easy, fast way to deploy features that may not exist in your existing technology. I'll take a brief break and then we'll cut into PBS real quick. Any other questions or anything else?
If there's any questions.
Okay, if you guys do have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We'll have about a 10 or 15 minute question session at the end if there's any questions that come up during the call. Okay, one of our big clients is PBS. So we work with a lot of large brand name organizations, including PBS and a number of PBS stations. Some of the challenges that PBS was facing are similar to challenges some of these large multi-state organizations run into. In this case, what they were dealing with was that they had, there's 130 PBS stations across the country. They span 4 different CRMs, a number of different marketing platforms, a number of different donation platforms. And what they faced was competition from Netflix, competition from Amazon, competition on viewing PBS content, right? They're coming out with, different shows all the time. They want you to see those shows, but in order to allow for that, to allow for local membership in your local WETA or the local WHYY to carry to a national PBS passport, streaming video service, they had to figure out a way to integrate all these different databases into one coherent national member database and keep it in sync, real time, and daily based on processes from back-end CRMs that might be 30 years old, right? So this is a hard problem. In fact, this was so hard that it was, 4 or 5 years ago, it would be completely unsolvable. So what we did is we went in and we plugged in bots to all the different CRMs that these stations were using, and we centralized that information into a PBS national member database, what they call their MVault. And so every day, actually every minute of every day, we have people signing up for stations across the country, and that data gets synced live, real time, through their member, to the national member database. Someone can click on one link and stream video from pbs.org. Based on a membership payment on a 30-year-old legacy database system that they've been running in-house, right? This is the type of thing that it allows you to do even when you're working with disparate, with old, with legacy technologies, with technologies that you thought you could never get off of. We allow a huge amount of reach into those systems to be able to pull the information out and sync it up into modern warehouses that you can then use for new uses. So every day we'll push in thousands and thousands of records, actually hundreds of thousands of records from their CRM to their national MVault. And we will also deliver a number of reports out for them. So they can see things like how much money is coming in. Now, mind you, this is not just for one donation service, right? This is not just a donation report. This is a donation report that spans dozens of stations, dozens of different installed CRMs, team approach databases, razor's edge databases, real-time databases, online CRMs, Luminate, we've got a Salsa in there. These reports are able to span huge numbers of technologies in ways that were previously unable to do. For single organizations that just have their own single systems, it's not as valuable because they're dealing with only a handful of systems. But particularly for large federated organizations, this becomes not just useful, it becomes critical to their operation. So we're producing these reports live for them out of their warehouse, basically real time. So so again, I'm going to focus a little more on some of the reporting bits. I will have time for questions at the end if you guys want to raise a hand or if I go too fast over some of these. Similar to some other, what a lot of agencies deal with, one of our clients is CCAH, and they are dealing with, dozens of clients and different CRMs and different technologies that their clients are using. So they have historically had a team of people who did nothing more than download reports from a given system, drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, run some sums and counts, and spend a half a day creating charts and graphs just to get a sense of how their clients' email performance was. So we'll cover some of their digital automation here. So what we did at Frakture is we went in and we helped connect all their different eCRM products, their Luminates, their Salsas, their Black Box set of suites, the net communities, engaging networks. All these different technologies, our bots are plugged in, and every morning they go into these systems, they download reports, they schedule reports. In many cases, they use APIs. In some cases, they actually have to log in, as a human otherwise would, to come in and grab the data. We pull it out, we clean it, we format it, we get variants and messaging structured out of that, campaign performance, etc. We'll clean it, we'll put it into a standard schema inside the CCAH data warehouse, and that data is then out of proprietary formats and out of formats that are exclusive to whatever email system they're using, and into a common technology infrastructure, into a common technology schema. They then layer on top of that, they then layer on top of that reporting solutions. So they then dial in their case, they're using Tableau and Excel to connect those to a raw data source that is consistent across clients. So if one of their clients wants to move technologies, it doesn't impact CCAH at all. They literally just unplug one technology, plug in the other one, the bots dial into the new technology, and are able to feed data directly into it. So we had some groups move to engaging networks from Luminate, and there was no, as far as the reporting and the infrastructure side of things went, there was virtually no change. So that independence of the database allows upgrades and migrations to happen without affecting everyone's timelines or everything else that's going on in the organization. So as a result, what they saw was that they're able to add new data sources. So clients can come on, usually in a day, we can get them spun up with a set of bots pulling that data. They can establish common rules across all organizations to run calculations like revenue calculations, et cetera. They can categorize and summarize data across clients. They can start, say, comparing performance of client A to client B and seeing how they're doing. And it is automated, so they don't even have to think about it, right? So they can bring on a new person, and that person can immediately be plugged into client-facing strategic work instead of worrying about the downloading of files, downloading of information, et cetera. Okay. In their case, they've saved hundreds of hours of human time. They dedicated that time to getting more insight on individuals, a lot more time on content development so they can do better creative, and much dramatic improvement in the return on investment for the time and effort that they end up working with. So to sum up, what we've talked about here thus far is using bots and automation to free your time and free your brain to get on to more important things, right? So that's the theme of automation and bots. That automation infrastructure typically needs a place to play. That place to play is what we call a warehouse, and the combination of the bots and the warehousing of that data allows for a huge amount of change in how you think about organizing, technology to use, and it dramatically saves us from the technology nightmare that we're all kind of collectively living in. So with that, I'll wrap up the prepared portion of this conversation. I'm sure there's a number of different thoughts on this or different questions. If you guys have questions, go ahead and post those questions in the Q&A. And while waiting waiting for some of those, we can actually, Ashley and I will just banter back and forth about some of the different ways that we've seen groups using this stuff.
Like Chris said, if you have any questions, feel free to chat them in either through the chat function or through the question and answer panel.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So one of the things that right beforehand we polled everyone who was coming on the call to see what different people were, what types of warehouses people were doing. Do you want to talk a little bit about what came out of that?
Sure. Well, we saw that I don't have the stats right in front of me, but we saw that most of you, about a third of you on the call already have data warehouses, which is awesome, and would love to hear more about any automation you have and any bots that you're curious about. About 70% don't have data warehouses that are interested, and then there was another, well, that's the whole 100%, but then there was another 10%.
Yeah.
In another exploration category.
Yeah, like what we're seeing is that, 5 years ago, nobody would have even known what a data warehouse was. We're seeing more and more people starting to hear about data warehousing and automation. And it's becoming easier for us to explain it because they're seeing the value of where some of a warehouse, an independent data warehouse is.
Well, so one of the questions I had for you
yeah.
is what's your favorite bot that we have deployed for clients?
Oh, that we deployed for clients? Oh, God, I really like BabbleBot. So one of our bots, the bot we call BabbleBot, has the power of Babel. BabbleBot translates anything to anything. That's kind of its theme. So I really love the name. If you guys are familiar with any kind of Douglas Adams stuff, so there's a Babelfish in there, which translates everything to everything. So I love BabbleBot. I think that's probably my favorite. Awesome.
Well, we have some questions. One of our questions is, can you automate data coming in from Google Analytics?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so we have Google Analytics bot that we actually use for a couple of clients. So we'll pull in data from Google Analytics and segment information. Google Analytics is a pretty broad product, so often we'll work with groups to figure out what data they want to pull in from it. And where they actually want that to go. So we do have a Google Analytics bot. We do a lot of work with Google itself for file transfers. It's kind of our native file infrastructure. So we're hyper familiar with a lot of the Google work.
And then we have another question that says, what does the data warehouse look like? And does the organization pull reports from the individual tools?
You can do both, right? So a warehouse is basically a database that lives in usually Amazon AWS, or some organizations have it in their own data infrastructure. A warehouse is a database. What people choose to do is put this data or use reporting tools to pull data out of these warehouses. So historically, people would go into tool X and download an email report or download a donor report. Well, what happens is the bots pull those reports, they put it into the warehouse in a standard format, right? Now, once it's in the standard format, you can layer on top of that warehouse any reporting tool that you want, whether you're using Microsoft reporting services or whether you're using, Google's got a new one out as well, or Tableau. Any of these reporting services you layer on top of it. The value in the warehouse is standardizing of it, storage of it, and the flexibility of it to work with no matter what tools you're working on.
So it sounds like the bots really help bring all the data together and really save time in the powering of reporting.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You can always go to your original tool, right? There's nothing in this that gets rid of the original tool you're using. Yeah. So if there's a favorite report you have to get rid of it, but what this does is standardize across tools.
Well, so we have a great question on security, and the question is, where do you store your data? How secure is it? And is my data mixed with the data of other organizations?
Yep. At Frakture, we do both. So an organization that already has a data warehouse infrastructure in place will dial into. So it's just that organization's data. We just get access to that warehouse and we'll work within their warehouse. We also offer our own hosted warehouse where it's a little more cost effective for some organizations to have us host the data, but we play nicely with wherever that database might live. We have a strong preference for cloud-hosted databases. We think that they're the most secure, the most scalable, et cetera, versus something that's on-premise. But for some of our larger groups, for Children's National Hospital, we actually have code that runs inside a client's network, leveraging their massive database investments they've already made.
And then also, we never mix clients' data warehouses with each other. Everybody has their own data warehouse, and client data is never mixed.
That's right. So as opposed to Salsa or some of the ECRM vendors, where I used to work, where data was mixed all together, warehouse is almost by definition standalone. So the one difference I would note for that is for agencies who are trying to do cross-client comparisons, they will elect to have us push their data from multiple groups into the same spot so that they can run those analytics. They can do that cross-organizational work, which is critically important to their success.
Yeah. We have a bot, we have a question asking about our bots that are pulling social media data. And can you share a little bit more about that messaging data and how those bots work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for a while at Frakture, we were like, oh, we're totally a social media reporting tool. We're not, right? So, like Frakture warehousing and bots typically works with donor information, contact information, statistics that are cross-channel, and you can use it for social work. But if your goal is to get social reports, go use the social media reporting suite. Go use the Boost suite, right? Like, if that's your use case, that's where it starts to become valuable. Now, if you want to start doing things like targeting people on social media, that's where bot automation and warehousing really, really comes into play. That's where pulling data out of your CRM, constructing a target audience for Facebook, and pushing that into Facebook every day becomes very, very valuable.
Right, because bots can just refresh that group every day, and it doesn't take a human to log in and do all that.
Exactly.
Right.
And so for social, that is the biggest value. I see a question there. What are the biggest challenges you face doing this work? Getting logins. It would shock you how hard it is for some groups to actually get to start working with them. Even after we, contract and scope of work and everything else like that, sometimes it takes our groups 4 to 6 weeks to just get us a login to a standard system. Once we have a login, if we have an existing bot, we can deploy it in a day. But the hardest thing we have is actually doing logins. Not working with APIs, it's not doing a lot of things you might think are hard. The hard bit is the logins, which typically reflects some organizational challenges that we see at groups.
Sure.
Data visualization tool, I like Slemma because it's super duper cheap, and you can get something up really, really quick. So Slemma, SLEMMA.com. Chart.io is good, is really good. I do have a preference for kind of the online version of things. So Slemma and Chart.io are very good. Google has a new one, which we've started to poke around with yet, which looks very good, but we have not yet done enough with it.
Called Google Studio, right?
Yeah, Google Studio. So.
And then we also have organizations using Power BI and Tableau, but those are more sophisticated and a little bit more costly.
That's right. And if you are a Microsoft shop, right? So if you have elected to go down the Microsoft road, we're agnostic. We don't care. Groups make that choice either way. If you go down that road, Microsoft reporting suites are good. So Power BI, SSRS, et cetera. So those are quite good. You should be cautious of extreme pricing in the reporting market, right? So reporting is commoditized. There are lots of great providers. Pricing does not need to be in the tens of thousands of dollars to get a good reporting studio these days. A few years ago it did, but nowadays you can experiment with different ones and see which ones you like the best. One of our big recognitions at Frakture was that separating out the reporting tool and interface from the data gives you so much more flexibility so that you don't have to try and jam them all into the same suite. So that's kind of our theme of Frakture with our warehousing is trying to separate out the data from the user interfaces you're using to enter data, to pull data around, to report on information, etc. So that's kind of key to what we've realized is the best way to go.
Great. Any other questions? We've run through all the questions that have been typed in so far. We're really happy that you joined us. I hope you learned a lot about warehousing and how bots are automating your warehouse and making it easier for you. Oh, here, another question just popped in. Is it a one-time cost or ongoing cost to maintain?
We're a subscription model, so we're definitely ongoing cost to maintain. And it usually depends on how many systems you're plugging into. So this is definitely targeted at groups that are mid to large size organizations, right? So this is not a online reporting tool that you plug in for $50 a month and go from there. We are a subscription. We do deal with large amounts of data, large volumes of data. So it's in the enterprise class of products, but we're definitely a subscription model. So, and we typically don't even have extensive startup fees to get things going.
And I also wanted to mention, we are going to be sending you a recording of this webinar. So if you want to share it with anyone, or if you had to take a break during this hour, you will get a recording in your email box this week.
What's your favorite bot, actually?
What's my favorite bot? That is a good question. Now you're putting me on the spot. Well, I know for one agency, and I guess I don't know what, I think more in function, you know? So rather than like actual bots, since I'm not in like the day-to-day of it, but just to know that like we have the ability to help an agency show list growth by source. And just like, you know, just every day being like, okay, these people came in from this source, this source, this source, and then it just seems like magic.
Right. Well, it actually comes from background of care too.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And so what we're getting at is there are types of reports that have historically been very hard to get. Performance by source, return on investment by source, right? These are reports which are conceptually easy, but to actually execute on them becomes very, very, very hard.
And then the other cool thing is, you know, when we're talking to organizations and we're talking to agencies, they're sharing the reports they're pulling, and they say, well, we do this report every week, or we do this report every month because it's too time consuming to do it every week. And then, we're like, well, we can help you automate that, but you can actually have that data every day. And then, you know, minds are blown, and then we start talking details, and then that's where I think starts getting exciting, because once you have access to daily data that is updated and refreshed and accurate, the possibilities are really endless.
Well, also, like, it actually came up with this phrase, the free your mind aspect of it is huge, right? Like, if you're not sweating how the data gets there, you can be strategic instead of being tactical. And that's a huge thing. And so I'll cover one more topic area as we kind of wrap up here. Data warehousing, a lot of people have realized is important. In fact, data warehousing is not really a new concept. So I don't want to put out that warehousing is really all that new. Automation is pretty new, but you know, it's a very the warehousing concept has been in the private sector for quite a long time. What's happening now, though, is kind of the warehousing as a service. So a lot of what we're talking about is this warehousing as a service. If I remember, I think about 30% of people on the call actually have warehouses already, right? And typically that's set up by a technical person on staff that has created a database, realizes the value of a warehouse, which is the critical first step. And once they realize the value of a warehouse, they build one, and then realize that they have to just define the database schema. They've got to then do all what's called ETL, which is extract, transform, load the data from all the different sources. And they spend, 6 months, building out or longer, building out custom code that only they understand, that gets data into their proprietary data schema that only they understand. And often they're very smart and very good, because to work at that level, you have to be very smart and very good. However, if that person leaves, or you're trying to expand that, or they start to change it, they've incurred a huge amount of code debt for an organization. So that the phrase code debt means you have to keep paying for that work over and over and over and over again as APIs change, as people leave staff, as people move on, et cetera. So when we talk about warehousing automation, we're talking about warehousing automation as a service, something that you don't have to sweat or hire for or deal with the code debt or worry about anybody leaving or anything like that. So that's kind of the difference that Frakture has, kind of warehousing as a service. Because we've seen so many organizations that value warehousing and get it, and then get stuck a year in because they just cannot either build out the integration ETL tools, it gets trapped behind other priorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the value is never realized. So we talked to a couple of people who were like, oh, we tried warehousing a few years ago and it was a disaster. Well, what was a disaster was that people involved in that warehouse got reprioritized. And that's something that that's all we do here. That's something which won't get reprioritized down at ETL, et cetera. So warehousing as a service, that's kind of the difference between a warehouse and kind of what we offer, in-house hosted, managed, built out warehouse, and kind of what Frakture, what our goal is to do.
Great.
I think that'll about do it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Ashley.
Great. Well, great to talk to you all, and we hope to catch you on a future webinar. Definitely, if you're not already on it, sign up for our email list and find us on Twitter as well. Thanks.
Thanks, all.